Hey there, welcome back to the Springs in the Desert podcast. I'm Jillian, your host, and I'm here with Father Paul for episode 3 of our mini series on examining our conscience. How are you, Father Paul?
I'm doing well and happy to be back as always.
Yes, it's such a joy to have you here, and I think just so it's so helpful to have you guide us through these examines as we have been the last few episodes. Listeners, if you missed the first couple episodes of this series, we are examining our conscience as a community before and leading into Lent as these episodes will air. And so our first episode was about examining our relationship with God. The second was our relationship with our spouse. And now we're going to enter into our relationship with others. And Father Paul will make sure to link his email in the show notes. He is leading several people in this community, whether that's through spiritual direction or maybe just a call to answer questions. I know that Father Paul would be happy to meet with you if that's something that you would like to pursue. And especially with this topic, a relationship with others that this episode is going to cover, whether it's the workplace or neighbors or even social media or just people, strangers while you're walking at the grocery store in line, we encounter other people every single day. And that's a gift because we're the body of Christ, but sometimes that can be a real challenge. I'm sure as you have witnessed in your direction with others, Father Paul.
Uh, yes, absolutely. For better or worse, we are forced to interact with people on a daily basis, right? That sounds terrible coming from a priest, but it's the truth. It's the truth, right? But whether if we're looking at this as a from the angle of an examination of conscience, right? You could have
Right.
a monk on Mount Athos who's lived in a cave for 20 years and come out, and the first thing he'll tell you is what a horrible, terrible sinner he is, having even not seen a person for 20 years. So our sins have little to do with people and more to do like with ourselves, right?
Right, right.
But I say this with all the love in my heart for all of God's creation, that people don't make it any easier, right? you know,
Yes. Yes.
while I kind of make light of this, it's true that how we interact with others, reflects how we're interacting with our spouse and with God, right? Because everything having to do with, we like to think of sin as like, oh, the bad things I shouldn't do. But really what sin is those things that affect my relationships with, first and foremost, with God, and then with my spouse, and then with others. So it's all really relational. So that's why this is such an
Hmm.
important topic to really hone in on, and especially when we're dealing with various aspects of seasons of infertility, where so many things become perhaps maybe biting or hurtful or piercing or what have you. Even when that's not the intent, that still happens because of other things going on. So we really have to keep ourselves in check, and one of the best ways to do that is to bring these things before the Lord in the sacrament of reconciliation, whether or not we even might not see them per se as sins, like, oh, I did 3 swears and I missed mass, like, not like that, but we bring it all before the Lord because we see this is what's separating us from one another and separating us from spouse or from the Lord, and that's really what it's about. So
You know, you bring up a really great point that I think is helpful, and I want to kind of ask you how to navigate that. Sometimes, in my own heart, I can get into maybe a habit of complaining or even like self pity, like the evil
mm,
one doesn't want me to see the light. And so when I'm examining my conscience, sometimes I catch myself saying, "Oh, they did this to me and my spouse said this to me." And I'm sort of listing the grievances that have happened to me instead of like asking the Lord to show me what my participation was and how like what is separating me from the Lord and from my spouse and others. So do you have any suggestions maybe if we are doing an examination but maybe trying to examine someone else's conscience for them instead of our own, like how can we kind of bring it back to our heart and the workings of our heart?
oh, absolutely. I believe in episode 1 I had referenced the prayer of Saint Ephrem, right? With let
Yes.
me see my own sins and not judge my brothers and sisters, right?
Let's
But to
yes.
take that even one step further, the psalmist says, Lord, let me not make excuses with excuses and sin, right? So don't
Mm,
look at the reason, oh, this happened, so that's why I did whatever, or that's why I acted this way. It cut the reason out of it. It's like, look, I acted this way, right? I did this, I said this, that wasn't right. Well, why? Not what made me do it, but why does that affect my relationship? Like, you know,
mm.
like,
That's
sure,
that's
yeah,
a
my
great.
spouse didn't take out the trash, and then, I caught him playing video games. So, yeah, I got upset naturally, but it was his fault because he should have taken out the trash, right? It's like, well, maybe we could have navigated that slightly better. But,
Yeah. That's a
it's those things.
helpful. Yeah, that's a helpful check there. I appreciate that.
Sure, sure.
Um, well, let's dive into this. We're going to do it as we have the others. I'm going to read through the examen that's available on the Springs in the Desert website. That's a supplement to our regular examination of conscience. So I'm going to read through it bullet by bullet point and give some time to pray and reflect. And then Father Paul is going to just add some thoughtful questions to lead us through this examen on our relationship with others. So let's just take a moment to ready our hearts to examine our relationship with those in our lives. On examining our relationship with others, have I cut off my relationship with family members or friends because of their pregnancy or life with children?
Super difficult, super difficult. And that's something we always have to keep in check. There's healthy boundaries, healthy limits, but then there's just a point where it becomes too much. But once again, that's something to work through in prayer with the Lord, but also perhaps with a counselor or a spiritual director or someone like that, and never go it alone.
Do I allow fleeting thoughts of jealousy or anger to fester inside myself? Do I acknowledge those emotions and deal with them, or do I purposefully dwell on them?
Those intrusive thoughts, those are the seeds of many, many, many things. Acknowledge them, confess them, and bring them to the Lord.
When people inquire about my family size or pregnancy, when they offer solutions or become intrusive in their questioning, have I responded in anger or with a lack of charity?
When Christ calls us to turn the other cheek, it's not always the way we might think it'd be if we're being assailed for our faith or persecuted or those sort of things. Sometimes it's the best thing to do to just perhaps, however hard it might be, to smile, say thank you for your recommendation, or I'll consider that, or something along those lines. Don't, yeah.
Have I wished ill on anyone who has announced their pregnancy?
Definitely something to not hold on to. Definitely something to bring to the Lord in confession and release yourself of that burden, because those are natural thoughts, those are natural human reactions, and the Lord knows we don't wish others ill, but in our pain and in our suffering, these are the gut reactions we have. But that's why we have reconciliation, to release ourselves of these burdens and to not carry that guilt.
Have I judged others as being less worthy of receiving a child than I?
Right, we're so concerned with others and their blessings that causes us to not only not focus on our blessings, but to miss out on the blessings that God has provided for us. So that's something to also be careful about, because this is extremely, extremely insidious to the point where we can convince ourselves that we're not doing it, and then we are, and then it gets far, far worse. So always be vigilant.
Am I going beyond the natural feelings of sadness and pangs of jealousy and harboring feelings of resentment or hatred toward family, friends, or acquaintances who are pregnant or have children?
Again, something to perhaps discuss with your spouse or a trusted person or a counselor, spiritual director, something like that to help navigate those emotions, because we do have natural human emotions that are okay and perfect to experience, but it's when they start to affect our daily lives and our relationships that we might need a little extra help and support.
Listeners, we know that your relationship with those in your life can be strained at times. There can be moments of joy and excitement and sadness and grief. And the Lord knows all of those feelings. He's familiar with every single one of them. And so you can bring those to Him and He can help you work through those. But you can also bring them to others, professionals, as Father Paul just mentioned. Maybe that's a spiritual director that you have. Maybe that's Father Paul. Maybe it's a mental health professional. We have a number on our website, a number of professionals listed on our website who are friends of the ministry. And if you happen to be local to them, you can certainly check them out. We'll make sure that's linked, or you could find someone local to your area that could help you work through some of these relationships and give you some support and encouragement to continue living a life of joy and abundance as the Lord has desired. I pray that this is a time for you to walk with the Lord and examining your conscience. And we will be back for the final episode on examining our relationship with ourselves. Thanks, Father Paul.
Thank you, Jillian. God bless.